Apologies ahead of time if you guys hear like roosters and birds in the background. There's like this property outside of where I am where they just have these roosters that can't tell when it's morning and when it's the middle of the friggin' day. So if you hear that, that's why. This is a topic that can very easily become me talking about the good old days and how modern game design is just not as good as it used to be. And whereas there's a lot of cases in which this is true, I don't feel like this mindset is really productive. So I'd rather take this topic in this video from an angle of how we can improve the way things are now through the lens of the current structures that game developers are working through. So with that being said, let's talk about the dystopian landscape of live service games. Live service games, in theory, should be a really cool freaking thing. I mean, think about it like this. You have a constant communication, a constant dialogue going back and forth with the developers. So if there are issues in the game or things that are ruining the experience for people, you are theoretically able to communicate these concerns, and the developers have all the power to just go ahead and make those fixes. You can get new content that refreshes the game and adds new things to experiences that you love. And it also allows for more time and resources to going into finalizing certain things that would otherwise be left on the chopping block. There were a lot of great games in the past that had tons and tons of content that was scrapped, whole chunks of the game that was taken out because the developers simply didn't have enough time. But with a live service game, that isn't really a factor, as you can just add to the game over the years that come. However, this is all theory. In practice, live service games tend to be a very frustrating endeavor, or very frustrating thing to get into. In order to talk about this, I'm of course going to go with a game that I myself have experience with, that being Halo Infinite. So let's break down the 3 points that I brought up before: the dialogue with the developers, the fixing of certain issues, and the addition of new content, and talk about how Halo Infinite is failing in all of these regards. And this is in light of the recent Season 2 update. I'm not going to go into too many of the specifics of that because there's a lot of channels out there that can do a much better job of that than I can. So with that being said, let's get right into how Halo Infinite exemplifies the live service game dystopian landscape. So first up, let's talk about the issues that come with the game. Now, back in the day, and I'm sorry to sound like such a boomer when I say this, if a game had certain issues with its balancing, or if there were... I have to take my shirt off because it's getting fucking hot in here. You guys might not be able to see it, but there's some X-rated Pliskin shit going on right now. If a game had certain issues with its balancing, or if there were glitches involved in the gameplay, or if there was some part of it that was just inherently difficult, we would have to deal with it. If there was a part or a level that you wanted to skip, you would usually have to make save points around that level in order to avoid that part that annoys you. If there was a bug, you would either have to deal with it or you could learn to exploit it to your benefit. And if a multiplayer game was completely broken in terms of its balancing, you would have to adapt and learn to play around that. Here in Halo Infinite, whereas all these issues should theoretically be fixed and everything should be great, 343 tends to add more problems than they solve. You see, what makes a game, even a broken game, good is a consistent rule set. A game is only as good as the rules that it follows. In a live service update game like Halo Infinite, the rules are constantly changing. So for example, we have one of the more infamous cases recently with the Mangler. The Mangler is a revolver magnum type weapon that rewards players for using precision, taking their time, and utilizing the shot and melee based combo. So with the Mangler, what you would be able to do is shoot a guy once and then be able to hit him, and that first shot would do just enough damage for you to be able to finish him off with said hit. Now, while normally you would either have to adapt around this or just play different game modes, this is a live service game. So 343 took the Mangler and they said, okay, how do we fix this? How do we quote unquote balance this better? And their answer to doing this was decreasing the melee damage by 10%, meaning that you would have to shoot someone twice instead of one time in order to hit them and kill them. Now, I don't have too much of an issue of this in multiplayer, because it's kind of common knowledge that in live service games, especially in multiplayer ones, that the weapon balancing is going to continuously change, and this isn't inherently a bad thing. You see, in Call of Duty, if they change the way one assault rifle works and make another assault rifle better or worse, it's fine because there are so many assault rifles to choose from. The weapons are very generic and samey feeling. There's at least 10 guns that do the exact same thing as their competition. In Halo, the guns tend to have a lot more personality, and making these changes have an influence not just on a certain weapon category or on an individual weapon, but the overall player experience. So I might take the time to understand how the Mangler works and how I need to use it, and all of a sudden you change it and the other guns that are there, and I all of a sudden have to learn an entirely new rule set. The entire game has changed. 343 has taken this even further, and they've messed with how this works in the campaign. Now in the campaign, when I do melee damage, that negative 10% damage decrease still counts there. I've been playing this game since, the campaign came out in December, and I've built up that kind of muscle memory. I know that if I'm shooting an elite with a battle rifle, after a certain amount of shots, I'll be able to get up close, bunt him, and he'll go down. However, now with this slight change in the core rules, I might use, my muscle memory, just play the game to relax, and I'll come in and I'll go for that bunt, and all of a sudden he won't be dead. Then he'll bunt me back, and then odds are another enemy will shoot me, and all of a sudden that groove is just thrown off. All that muscle memory I've built up is now actively working against me, because the rules of the game have changed. And if a game doesn't have static rules that you can learn and adapt to, it's very difficult to get good with it. It's more likely now that I'll go ahead and I'll do that and I'll feel cheated, because I was following the rules. I'd taken the time to get to know this game, taken the time to get good at it, and now I'm being punished for that time that I've put into learning this game. And this ties directly into the second problem we're going to be talking about. Theoretically, adding in new content should be a great thing. However, it seems like 343 is actively removing more content than they are adding. Recently, within the Season 2 patch, they talked about how certain glitches in the campaign where you could use tanks or fusion coils to launch yourself around the map and have a lot of fun just messing around with the physics have been taken out. So there's a lot of players that like to do speed runs or just like to do tricks that now can't play the game how they want it to be played. Now you'd think in an ideal world, the resources that 343 has been very clear are not enough and have to be used sparingly because they're under tons of stress. You'd think in a situation where they're pushed with their backs up against the wall, that they take whatever time, energy, and resources they have and they put it into something that we want. For example, co-op campaign. Why would you take time away from developing a functional co-op campaign, something that 100% of your player base is waiting for, and instead divert that attention into actively removing features from the game? Especially when you start messing with the campaign, because everyone loved the campaign. Everyone, Halo Infinite is by no means a perfect game, and there are tons of videos out there critiquing it. I even have one of mine up critiquing it. However, if there's one thing everyone could agree on, is that the campaign was fun. It was so much fun experiencing a Halo that felt like Halo, and so much fun experiencing certain encounters. I've talked before about how one of my favorite parts of the game is fighting the hunters in the campaign. I loved it. I've had a lot of fun with it. Even people that were really skeptical about Halo or not really into Halo had a lot of fun with it. The only complaint really was that it was a little too short. And this reminds me of a very similar situation back in 2014. Just take a look at Ground Zeroes. It's an amazing Metal Gear experience. To this day, it's probably one of the best. Its stealth is tight, its combat is intuitive, and there's so much hidden content to keep you coming back for more. The only complaint people had back in 2014 was that this was a pretty short experience. Now, of course, this was followed up with the Phantom Pain that delivered a lot more, but at the same time has its own controversies. I'm not going to get into that. But just imagine, okay? Imagine if Ground Zeroes released in 2014 and people loved it as much as they did, and Konami took certain features out of the game. They change the experience and take away certain elements that people liked instead of just providing more of what people wanted. It sounds crazy. If you had told me in 2014 that there'd be a game where the only complaint really was that people were saying it's too short and they want more, and then the company responded by taking more from it, I tell you, you were crazy. However, this is what's happening with Halo Infinite. It's the exact scenario with Ground Zeroes, except instead of delivering and giving more, they're actively taking away. And while it's easy for me to say, oh yeah, it's because it's live service, they're constantly going to be changing things and taking things you like away, it really doesn't need to be like this. And 343 and every other video game developer really can do better. With all the tools at their disposal for communicating with their fan base, they shouldn't be making these mistakes. The last issue I want to bring up is an issue that's plaguing not just Halo Infinite, but a lot of competitive multiplayer games, not just shooters. And that is an over-reliance or an over-focusing of that communication between developer and fans being relegated to developer and competitive pro gamers. Look, I'm not here trying to mock the pro gamer scene. If someone really wants to dedicate themselves, get good at that, and make money with that, that's totally fine. But there is definitely an issue with developers catering almost exclusively to these types of players in matches. I mean, just fucking look at these guys. Alright, like, jokes aside, like, these are guys that are willing to just sit down on their consoles or more likely PCs with their eyes a centimeter away from the screen, training their entire muscle memory to get good at these games, to get faster and get snappier. And they want games that reward them for doing that. Here's the problem. There's a lot of us who are playing these games that might have jobs, and we might come home really tired, and we might want to turn on a game and be able to play it and relax. There are some of us that have partners and children that we need to give time to and spend time with, and we want video games as something that we can just casually do on the side. Or maybe there's people that are just like me and don't have that quick reaction speed, that, you know, jumping across the map and keeping your crosshair directly on the enemy's head as you're zipping in all directions at lightning speed. I can't do that, right? Like, take a look at this footage of me playing Halo. I'm not Mint Blitz. And the thing is, there are games that are completely built around this concept, this very competitive, speed-based concept. And while Halo can and has been competitive in the past, the core modes or the core gameplay philosophy with it isn't one that's all about, okay, keep your crosshair on the head so you can kill them as fast as possible. It's about balancing all the different weapons in the sandbox and using them in unison to get the edge over your opponent. I was playing Halo Infinite with my brother and dad the other day, and my dad said, you know what, I don't really like when we play online with other people. I prefer it when we go up against the bots because I can use the grapple hook, I can try out all the different weapons and all the different vehicles, and that's just a lot more fun. And at first I was just like, haha, you're bad at this game, but then I just sat and I thought about it, and he was right. Like, all the times I've been playing Halo Infinite, I'm trying to go for those precision weapons, and I'm trying to focus solely on headshots. I'm not thinking like back in the days of earlier Halo games Of course, they still had the issue with precision weapons, but there were a lot of game modes that were mainstream game modes where I was thinking more so, okay, I'm going to pick up an SMG and a plasma pistol, and I'm going to take out the shields and then whittle down their health at close range. I'm going to use dual-wielded maulers. I'm going to go around and I'm going to stay in areas of the map that are very close quarters where I will have the advantage. And I could do that. Those playstyles were perfectly viable. If I didn't want to base my entire gameplay around, okay, how precise and how fast I could be, I could do that and still contribute to my team. However, here in Halo Infinite, it's just so freaking sweaty and it's just not fun. Not all of us play video games like that. Some of us, want to train our reflexes for other things. I don't want to get crazy good at using a gun in a video game and spending all of my life and time into developing my senses to be able to do that. I'd rather be able to do that with real life weaponry.
Come on, get out of there! Good. All the stuff.
And again, a lot of people that play just want a fun time to relax, and Halo Infinite, there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to. You want to have your competitive modes, cool, but the core gameplay modes that the majority of people play needs to ease up a little bit. It doesn't even feel like Halo when I'm playing the multiplayer. And that ties exactly what we're going to talk about next. As I said before, Halo has always been about utilizing the two different weapon types to combat not just your enemy's health, but also their shields. How you balance your plasma weapons and your kinetic weapons to achieve victory influences how well you'll do. It's not about, okay, can I just keep the crosshair on the person's head? It's about, what ways can I get creative with the sandbox presented to me and utilize different strategies to come out on top? And I feel that even today, in the modern video game landscape where live service is a normal thing, not like it has to be a thing, there's still a lot of games that can just come out in a polished state and get new content in the form of DLC that will be coming in the future. Look no further than my game of 2021, Resident Evil 8, that delivered an incredible, polished game that was so much fun to go through, that had extra content, and there's still DLC planned to come along an entire year after its release. But even live service games don't need to be this bad thing. It doesn't need to be an overly competitive, inconsistent rule set. And to prove that, look no further than MCC. MCC is a collection of all the different Halo games that have come out in the past. And in a way, all of these live service updates have amplified games that I've grown up loving in ways that I could have never even imagined. For example, take a look at Halo Combat Evolved. I never even dreamed about being able to play it online. I grew up playing it on the original Xbox, so if I wanted to play with other people, I needed to do split screen. I never dreamed about being able to customize my weapons and bring certain camos and skins and visor colors into the campaign. That's so cool, and I love that the developers have been able to do this. Look no further than what Bungie did in terms of adding new content to their games. Halo 3 and Reach in particular are games that have garnered such a wide following because of the elements that have been added to them, in the sense that they are very player friendly. Look at Forge mode. You can make maps and weapon sets that are balanced around exactly how you want to play. The custom games option also ties into this. So if you don't have a lot of fun playing with the normal or competitive modes, you can kind of design your own. And other people that like that can also play with you. And that's a direct kind of link between developer and player. And it even blurs the line as it allows the player to interact with the game in a way that allows them to cater it to their own tastes, which is something that 343 is desperately trying to do with all of these armor customizations and the updated shop and supposedly Forge and custom modes whenever they get released. But these games released with those modes, and that's part of the reason why they garnered such a following, because it was so player friendly right from the start. I mean, take a look at Halo Reach's Griff Ball, for example. If you don't even like the shooting aspects of the game, you don't even need to engage with them. They're so customizable, and friendly towards you as a player that you can cater your experience for if you want it to be incredibly competitive or if you want it to just be relaxed. So both ends of the spectrum are satisfied in those cases. But then let's say you want the game to be overall competitive with its main modes. Look no further than Halo 2. That game is a broken mess and turns into a precision fest. Except unlike Halo Infinite, it's not like there's all these weird modes that amplify the competitiveness and constantly change the rule set, constantly putting that emphasis on speed and twitch reflexes. In Halo 2, the game is broken and it's really competitive and there's one nominal strategy, i.e. the battle rifle, but it stays that way. So even someone like me that isn't good at this type of gameplay can take the time to learn how this game works, learn how this weapon works, learn how to use it in these maps, and get kind of good at it. Still get to a point where I can still have fun. If the rules are consistent, even a game with a multiplayer like Halo 2 is approachable to someone who plays casually. However, because 343 is constantly changing the rules, it makes it that much harder for the casual audience to keep up with these changes, to keep up with this high-intensive gameplay. So in short, 343 needs to do 3 major things. 1. Stop taking away features that people like and instead try to add features that people have been asking you for. 2. Please make a situation or create an environment that's approachable to not just your hardcore competitive fans, but also your casual players that, believe it or not, makes up a bulk of who's playing your game. And 3, try to maintain a consistent rule set. So even if your game is really competitive, or even if you're going to be adding in new maps or taking certain things away, if there's a consistent rule set, I can try to build up that muscle memory to get better at the game and adapt. If 343 does these things, Halo Infinite could become a really fun game to play. But now that this stuff is even bleeding into the campaign a little, I think 343 needs to take a step back and reevaluate what they're doing with this game. Because if they keep on going down this path where even the campaign doesn't have a consistent rule set and is losing features and becomes more like the multiplayer, God forbid, where only certain weapons and certain strategies work, then Halo Infinite's going to be something that a lot of us drop. Anyways, hopefully we see some more positive changes and it becomes a game that all of us can enjoy. This has been Pliskin, over and out.